What's up, everybody? This is episode 38 of Hoops Talk with Dave's Joint. For everybody that's shown love to this project so far, check it out on YouTube, Facebook, and IGTV. But without further ado, I have a very special guest for you guys, Mr. Matt Bloom, the head coach of the Rutgers Preparatory School varsity basketball team. Coach, thanks for coming on, to share your story.
No, thanks for having me, Dave, and thank you for everything that you do. Obviously, with everything you do on social media and also the exposure that you give the kids, it's wonderful. And I'm happy to be here, happy to talk basketball and life and anything else.
Absolutely. So let's start off first with what's Matt Bloom's coaching philosophy?
Coaching philosophy. So, and we'll touch on a bunch of different things, but I'm a history teacher as well at Rutgers Prep, and
Nice.
I do a philosophy unit. So coaching philosophy, teaching philosophy, basically any philosophy, I like to break it down to the core. And when you break it down, it's about human nature and about people. And when you look at basketball coaching, I think it's important that you study the people. And in basketball, you have talent and you have everything else. And every person has some amount of talent and some amount of everything else. And obviously you need some talent to be successful, but we really focus on the everything else. And Rutgers Prep is a special community, and it takes the right person to fit in there. And the everything else is that much more important, whether it's academics, whether it's being happy for someone else's success. Obviously, there's a lot of core values that go into the everything else, but we really stress that. We really emphasize that. And when you talk coaching philosophy, as a coach, I want to inspire others. I want to give to others. And in order to have a team that works, you need your players to have that same mentality. You need your most talented guys to inspire the other guys. And you need the other guys to inspire your talented guys, or else you're only going to be the talent in the room. And we want to be better than the talent in the room. So there's a whole lot of that other stuff that goes into the coaching philosophy. But again, it's about people, it's about relationships, and it's about getting the most out of people. And when you buy into that team mentality, it helps every individual in the room. And that's basically what we're all about.
Well said. So where does basketball start for you?
So where does basketball start? So obviously, if you know me, I'm not a very tall guy. I'm about 5'7" on a real good day when I wear real good sneakers. But obviously, my athleticism, my height, my whole background led me to play baseball. But my heart was with basketball. So I would play competitive baseball through high school, but all growing up, I was in the playgrounds, the streets, the driveways, just playing basketball because I loved playing basketball. And I grew up in Teaneck, New Jersey. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but North Jersey, not too far from New York City. And Teaneck is a basketball town. Everybody knows that. The Teaneck basketball team was great. The other sports were okay, decent, but it was a basketball town. And I wasn't good enough to play basketball at that level in Teaneck. And I knew that from a very young age. I'd still play pickup with all the guys that were on the team, and they respected me. I could shoot, so I generally stayed on the court because I could make the free throw to stay in the game. But I knew that they were better than me. And I knew that even when I played with those guys that played for Teaneck even, I knew that I had to sacrifice something in order to stay on the floor with those guys and to have them respect me. So I had a coach's mentality even when I was in like middle school, high school, and all coming up. And it's interesting how it all played out, but my heart was always with basketball. So playing baseball, obviously I'm a huge sports fan, but I always wanted to be involved in basketball. When I was actually in high school, I lived nearby to Fairleigh Dickinson University. So after school, I would just kind of run down there, check out practice. I was a gym rat. And in ninth grade, they basically asked, like, do you want to do more? Do you want to help us out? I don't know if it was legal with the NCAA back then, but no one really cared back then. So I became a ball boy / manager / do whatever they needed me to do. So I spent 4 years really helping a Division I basketball program when I was in high school. I would still go and support all the Teaneck High School basketball games, but in high school, I was a manager at FDU. I also had some basketball in my family. My mom's cousin his name is Ron Gagnon. He was the head coach at St. Francis, New York for years. And yeah,
Wow.
so it's a small world,
Damn,
obviously.
that's my guy right there.
Yep. So
Wow.
yeah, obviously we go way back. We would always talk basketball at family gatherings and this and that. He actually would tell me, don't get into basketball. Like, you could do anything else. You don't want to get into basketball. So my family kind of encouraged me to kind of go away from it, but my heart was always in basketball. And I ended up going to college at the University of Pennsylvania. I was a student manager. And then I actually got offered the ops job at Penn out of college, and I turned it down. So I spent 2 years working at a law firm. I realized that I didn't want to do law. So that made it clear in my mind that I wanted to get back into basketball. So then after that, it was basketball odd jobs. And then I worked at Rutgers and then LaSalle, and now I'm at Rutgers Prep. So my heart's always been with basketball, but my journey's been pretty interesting.
So let's backtrack. So
Sure.
talk about growing up in Teaneck, and what was the basketball culture like out there?
So Teaneck basketball, growing up, obviously a lot of talent in Teaneck, and there's still talent. There's always been talent in Teaneck. When I was little, there were guys like Mike Nurse and Pete Vignier and Mo Sessoms, some real high major guys, and it was exciting. Every game was an event, and the town got pretty hyped for every game, and obviously it was great. And when I got to high school, we had an unbelievable team that ended up going to the TOC final my junior year, I believe. And it was just awesome to be a part of. And obviously, as we said, I wasn't good enough to play, but I was friends with all those guys. And obviously we played in gym class, we played in the driveway, we played at the playgrounds, and all great basketball people that I still keep in touch with to this day.
Indeed. Shout out to Teaneck, right off of Route 4.
The Highwaymen.
So you went to UPenn. You know,
Correct.
how was UPenn back when you were there?
It was great. I mean, I loved everything about it. It's obviously an Ivy League school, but it's in Philadelphia. So you got the city vibe, you got good academics, and we had a really, really good basketball program. At the time, Fran Dunphy was the head coach. He later went to Temple, and he actually just got the Temple AD job. But he was the head coach at Penn, and to this day, when I watch a basketball game, I hear his voice. So he was very inspirational in not just basketball, but how I approach life and how I kind of pay attention to every little detail. And I mean, he's one of the best human beings that I know. And he's a great basketball coach, but Fran Dunphy as a human being is one of the most influential people in my life. And obviously that has a lot to do with why I coach and why I want to inspire the next generation of basketball players. But at Penn, we had a really good basketball team. We went to the NCAA tournament twice, had some really talented guys, some guys who are now in coaching, and friends for life. So I love that experience, and it was great. We could compete with anybody, but we also had a lot of fun.
So when you were at Penn, did you ever get to go see any high school games, the Sixers, Villanova, like any of the programs out there?
Oh, absolutely. And something about Philadelphia and the Big Five culture, when you're not in season, those guys are always playing with each other. So whether it's a pickup game at the Palestra, or you're getting on the subway and playing at LaSalle, or it's basketball. And obviously I love basketball and I'm passionate about it. So I remember stories about being in college and kind of just taking public transportation over to Camden and watching DeJuan Wagner play, and obviously getting to any game that I could possibly go to. So yeah, I mean, I'm always in the gym. That's just something about me. I love being in the gym.
How were the games at the Palestra? Like, were they like sold out for every game, or like was it just for like certain events?
Yeah, so obviously the Big Five games. So when you have back then, whether it was Penn and St. Joe's or Villanova and LaSalle, it's sold out. It's 50-50. The crowd's going back and forth. There's really nothing like it. And obviously I hope the Big Five stays that way. Obviously with Villanova being pretty hot recently, it's helped. But there's nothing like those games. And back in my day, obviously St. Joe's had the team with Jameer Nelson. They were nationally ranked and obviously went to the Elite Eight. I mean, those games were unbelievable. And every Big Five game, no matter how good the teams were, it always seemed to go down to the last possession. And it was a rock fight. It would be in the 50s and defensive battles, crowds going back, just unbelievable games. And there's nothing like it. I would highly suggest checking out a Big Five game at the Palestra.
So let's fast forward to 2006. You just left Skadden, Arps, Slate, Meagher, and Flom.
Yep, so that's the law firm. And
you went on to become a consultant for the Brooklyn Nets. How did that opportunity present itself?
All right, so interesting story how that all went down. So I worked at that law firm, as I said, for 2 years. And really good job out of college, but not at all what I wanted to do. And it was before social media and kind of anything like that. Like, no one was on their phones looking for information. So we had 15-minute breaks, and I remember spending every 15-minute break on ESPN.com and just seeing what was going on in the basketball world. And those 2 years really made me realize that I need basketball in my life. And I know now that I want to get into basketball. So after 2 years, I just kind of quit. It's the only real time I've quit anything in my life, but I knew it was the right move because my heart just wasn't in law. I gave it a shot. I didn't enjoy it, and I needed to get into basketball. So at the time, that law firm was in New York City, and my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, she lived in Philadelphia. So I remember quitting, taking a train to Philadelphia, and just getting off at New Brunswick, which was obviously where Rutgers University is, and also where Rutgers Prep happens to be now, coincidentally. But at the time, I just knew I wanted to get into basketball. I didn't know how. I had a ton of things going through my mind, and I just ended up showing up at the Rutgers basketball office. Now, Fred Hill was the head coach there at the time, and that's who I ended up working for at Rutgers, fast forward a year. But I knew him from the days at FDU. He was an assistant coach at FDU when I helped out when I was in high school. When I was at Penn in college, he was at Villanova, so we stayed in touch. So that was kind of my basketball connection, was Coach Hill at Rutgers. So I went into the office and I said, Coach, I just quit my job. I need a job. I'm here to help. What can I do? And he starts laughing. He was cracking up. And his line has always been the same. Every time he sees me, he tells me I was supposed to have like some Fortune 500 company job and I was supposed to hire him someday. But here I am kind of begging for a job. And he at the time didn't have one. But I remember every day I would either show up or call him, Coach, I want to work in basketball. Coach, what can I do for you? And finally, he just said, all right, look, you can help me run these camps, or you can help me with this project on the side. So I did little projects for him kind of that year. I also did some other odd jobs, but I applied. I just kind of put myself out there, and I applied to the New Jersey Nets at the time. They weren't in Brooklyn yet. And there was this opportunity to do sports analytics, which at the time wasn't really a thing. And there were a couple analytics guys in the NBA. Not every team had a department, let alone a person, but the Nets were one. They had a director of statistical analysis. So I just kind of shot him in a letter, actually. I think it was a handwritten letter. And he responded. And we went back and forth a little bit. And then they kind of gave me this test. I had to break down some game tape and kind of see if it matched up with how they watched it. And long story short, it did. I became a consultant, and I was basically tucked away in a room watching 3 or 4 NBA games every day, which sounds great, but over time, it was an unbelievable opportunity. But I learned more about basketball that year than any other year in my life, just watching and breaking down games. And at the time, what we did, we were creating a defensive metric, so a way to rank NBA players based on defense, which to this day, I mean, they do little things, but I haven't heard of anything that was quite at that level of detail. So we were breaking down basically every other team other than the Nets. And I would watch every single play 6 times. I would watch once for the team and then once for every single guy on defense. And then we would break it down based on a whole bunch of criteria and numbers. And we ended up making a list, and I made a presentation to the general manager at the end of the year who at the time wasn't really sold on this idea of analytics, but they were just kind of giving it a shot. And it was a fascinating project. And like I said, I learned a ton about basketball just watching every play 6 times. And you see how things break down and kind of why other teams score and all kinds of stuff. So it was a wonderful learning experience.
So before we get into Rutgers,
Sure.
You coached at a few camps, Eastern Invitational,
Yep.
Hoop Group, and last but not least, ABCD. Let's talk about, this was during your college years, correct?
Yeah. So obviously the hoop group was after college, but the ABCD camp was actually in high school and in college. So
Wow.
it was at FDU Teaneck at the time. So again, right by where I grew up. So I would just run down there, and the ABCD camp, there was nothing like it. And I wish there was something like it today, but it was one of a kind, and it was all the best high school players in the country. You had the best college guys as counselors. You had pro guys working out, and it was like a who's who of basketball. And I obviously remember one of my jobs as an intern was kind of walking Kobe Bryant around and making sure that he had everything he needed. So unbelievable experiences when you're kind of at that age, and it just cemented my love for the game of basketball.
Wow. So were you present when LeBron and Lenny Cook went head to head?
So I was under the basket, and I to this day, I'm still looking for footage because I would love to see myself. But I had a towel, and if someone fell, I was wiping the court. So I was at that game, and it was an unbelievable game.
Wow.
It came down to the last possession.
So you saw a lot of action in those years.
A lot of basketball. Yep.
Wow. So let's fast forward to 2007 when you finally did get that job at Rutgers. Let's talk about how it was coaching for Fred Hill and coaching in the Big East.
It was in the Big East at the time, probably the best Big East of all time, the best basketball league to this day. And it was an awesome, awesome experience. Obviously, high major basketball. Coach Hill is an unbelievable recruiter. His vision was outstanding. The only problem was the rest of the league was that good. Every team had 3 or 4 first-round picks, legit NBA guys, and it was day in and day out. And one of the stories that I'm reminded of, we had a week. I think we're the only team to this day in the history of college basketball where we played the number 1, 2, and 3 team in the country back to back to back. Obviously, took 3 L's, and then it got easier with a game at number 14 Marquette. So, I mean, that's the type of league we were up against. We had talent. The guys were just young. So had they stayed and had they kind of stuck around and if they had grown with the program, I think we would have turned the corner. But again, it's a business, and obviously a couple guys left and some things happened, and we were let go.
Yeah, talk about being let go. How hard is that?
Yeah, so again, there's nothing like it. And I'll never forget, obviously, how that all went down with Coach Hill. And obviously, everyone has an opinion. We were good for another year. He actually had a meeting with the athletic director at the time, and then some stuff happened at the baseball game. And I don't know if you remember that history, but long story short, he got let go. The rest of the staff was kind of in limbo for a month. And this wasn't in March, the normal time you get let go. This was in May. So late April into May, which is a really tough time to kind of get another job.
Right.
So we got let go. I want to say it was in the middle of May. So all other staffs are pretty full. Mike Rice just came in and he got the Rutgers job. I had some good connections with Mike Rice, but unfortunately that didn't work out. He brought his own guys in. But I mean, it was tough. It was. There's highs in basketball and there's lows, and that was certainly a low. And it's interesting because the day before we pretty much got let go, I remember Darren Savino at the time, if you know that name, he was the interim head coach.
Yeah.
And I was one of the only people who stuck around with him. Other guys had other jobs and they were looking for jobs, but I stuck around kind of doing anything that either Coach Savino or the AD kind of asked us to do. And I was really hopeful that whoever the new coach would keep me. But obviously it didn't work out. And I think had Darren Savino gotten the job at the time, I think I would have been a Big East assistant. So it's amazing to think that tomorrow you could either be a Big East assistant coach at a young age or unemployed for the first time in your life. And obviously I was unemployed, and it's adversity. And as they say, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I really think I needed some soul searching, and I needed to kind of think about what was really important in life, and so on and so forth. But everything happens for a reason. And obviously I'm now, in hindsight, I'm thankful for that experience.
Honestly, the hardest part about college basketball, what many people don't know, is that, you know, when a staff gets fired, only one person is getting paid, the head coach. Everybody else has to scramble, for cover pretty much. You know what I'm saying? Like when that job is done, they get paid, I think, basically until July 1st, and then that's it.
Correct. Yep. So
that's
again,
rough.
I was one of those guys. I was scrambling, and like I said, that was May, so there were really no college jobs open, and I still wanted to coach. I still had a drive and a passion. And obviously, when you get fired, you don't want that to be the end. You want that to be something that ignites you and kind of motivates you. So that next year, I ended up doing some odd jobs that really, really helped me and set the stage for what was to come. So I ended up working at Salle University in academics, in academic support. And it's fascinating kind of looking back how that all worked out. So when we were at Rutgers, we had a player by the name of Earl Pettit. He's a Philly guy, really talented kid. Ended up going to Rutgers, didn't play much. He actually played a bit, but he wasn't happy. He's a Philly guy. He wanted to be in Philly. So when I was still at Rutgers, I was kind of the middleman trying to help him find a new home. And he came down to Temple, which was at the time Coach Dunphy, and LaSalle, which had a couple guys that I knew through the business. I knew Harris Adler because when I was at Penn, he was an assistant at Penn. So he came down to Temple and LaSalle, ended up choosing LaSalle. So when we got let go, I called him and had a great conversation. And he's an awesome human being. He's one of the most loyal kids you'll ever meet. And he went to the LaSalle coaches and basically said, can we help this guy? Obviously, the staff didn't have any spots, but we figured something out in academic support. And I spent every morning tutoring LaSalle students, some athletes, some non-athletes. But, I mean, I just kind of stayed involved. And I wanted to be on a college campus, this and that. So I did that in the morning from 8 till noon. Then I drove an hour to Central Jersey, where I managed a basketball gym, the Monroe Sports Center. And it was at that gym where I made some of the connections that I still have today, which it's unbelievable to think about it. And last night at Trey Patterson's ceremony, we were reminiscing about it. And it was awesome. And how everything comes full circle. So Coach Hill, one of the things that he used to instill in us as his staff, he would tell us, you have to teach the game of basketball as if you're teaching 9-year-olds. And he was consistent with that message. Like, don't expect McDonald's All-Americans to know what you're talking about. You have to really break it down to a 9-year-old level where they're really going to understand you, and they're not just going to think they know, they're going to know. So I always had that in the back of my head. So in that year in limbo, when I'm running a gym, I'm thinking I could either kind of latch on to an established AU program and just kind of stay in the loop with kids, or I could coach 9-year-olds. So what I did was I put together the best 9-year-old team that I could possibly put together using all of my basketball connections and just kind of my eyes and observing kids and this and that. And I ended up coaching a team with Trey Patterson and Noah Harris, who are currently on my Rutgers Prep team. So it's such a small world. And I did that for a year before LaSalle had a job open up. And then I went back to LaSalle full time. So that's kind of how my story went.
Talk about, the LaSalle years.
So I loved my 6 years at LaSalle. And obviously I worked for Dr. Giannini, Dr. G. He's one of the best basketball coaches that I've ever been around. And obviously when you analyze coaches and look at jobs, LaSalle is a very tough job. You're in the Atlantic 10, which you're expected to win high major games, but you don't really have high major resources. And the job that Coach G did at that school is unbelievable. I mean, the highlight, obviously, we went to the Sweet 16 in 2013, and to this day, it's one of the best basketball experiences of my life. An unbelievable run for a great group of guys and we enjoyed every single minute of it. But wonderful coach. He's a thinker. He's Dr. G, so he's got a doctorate, and he challenged us to think every day. And we were often thinking outside the box or thinking of ways to compete at that level without those resources.
And I love LaSalle's gym. I'm not gonna lie. It looks like a big arena from the outside, but when you go inside, like, it's a huge gym.
Yeah, it's a fascinating gym, and the joke is that it's on the 3rd floor. So when you go into the building, you got to take the elevator or the stairs up to the 3rd floor, and no one understands that. So that's always a talking point, but it's one of a kind. And obviously, it's not the same type of gym as Dayton, which has 12,000 screaming fans, but it's got a nice little personality. And when it's full, it's loud. And we really took advantage of those years. I think we had one of the best home records, and it was an unbelievable environment when it was full.
Indeed. So what led you back to the high school ranks in coaching for Rutgers Prep?
So obviously, I was at a point in my life in about 2016, I think that's when I made the transition. But I was at the point in my life where I had a young child. Family life was more and more important to me. And I was at an age, I was still the director of ops, and I was at an age where, do I want to kind of travel anywhere in the country to be an assistant coach, or do I want to do something with a little more job security? So Rutgers Prep opened up, and at the time, I still wanted to be a college coach, honestly. But I still entertained it. And I went for an interview, and when I set foot on campus, I kid you not, it felt like a college campus, and it felt different. And I thought to myself, I could really see this place as my home, and it would be a great challenge. And also, I could obviously have a lot more time with my family. So that all factored in. And then obviously I met the people there. I saw the community, and it just all made sense at the right time.
So talk about Rutgers Prep, the school.
Okay. So it's a really, really strong academic school, and it's got a great faculty, great staff, unbelievable community. And we pride ourselves on our community. We're a very diverse group, but everybody gets along. There's 3-year-olds up until seniors, and everybody knows everybody. Everyone's giving high fives in the quad, and it's just a fun place to grow and to learn. And it's everybody makes each other better, if that makes sense. It's cool to do well in school. I think obviously you're not just a basketball player when you're at Rutgers Prep, you're a student. And from 8:30 in the morning until 3, you're a student. And you're not Trey Patterson, the basketball player. You're Trey Patterson, the 4.0 student. So, I mean, it's a special place, and not a lot of places are like that.
For the grand price of $42,500 a year, I see why.
Yes, and that obviously there's value there. So you're getting your money's worth. My son is in 1st grade. He's just finishing up 1st grade at Rutgers Prep, and obviously that doesn't make my job the easiest job to kind of attract kids, but we want to attract the right kids. We want to attract kids that want to be there and that see the value in that education, and also know that we're going to get it done on the basketball court.
Absolutely. So, talk a little bit about Trey Patterson.
So obviously, wonderful student athlete, the best of the best. As a basketball player, he's, in my opinion, the most versatile kid in the country. He's 6'8". Every day he's getting stronger. He gets better as he breathes. It's unbelievable to watch his growth. From the day I met him when he was 8 years old until now, he works and he gets better. And that's why I know he's going to continue to be successful. But as we talked about, there's way more to Trey than the basketball player. He is a true student athlete. He can do anything in life. I can't wait to see what he does, whether he runs for president, whether he goes into business, but he's going to be successful. He's a natural leader. And one thing that I love about our basketball program and where we're at, I'm now going into year 4. He's going into his senior year. So I've grown as a coach alongside Trey. And when Trey Patterson goes full speed in the off season and an 8th grader walks into the gym and sees that on their tour, I mean, you don't know anything else. Obviously, there's some coaching involved, but for example, we had a group of 5 9th graders on our varsity team last year, and they only know one way. They only know the Rutgers Prep culture that Trey Patterson breathes, which makes my job as the coach easy because it's a winning culture and Trey works. I mean, a little story that I can share. Obviously, we weren't very deep. We had pretty much a rotation of 6 guys this past year, and then some young guys that are very talented, but they're not ready yet. They're 9th grade, and obviously we're bringing them along at the natural speed. So any injury or fatigue or even foul trouble could really get us in trouble. And luckily, we made it the whole season without really dealing with anything kind of catastrophic. We had obviously bumps and bruises along the way, but we made it through the whole season playing really 6 guys. So I know in my head as a coach that whatever I plan for practice, Trey is going to do another hour on his own after full speed. So in my head, I have to plan for practice knowing that, and I don't want to overdo it. So I like we were going 55 minutes of skill development by the end of the year just because I knew Trey was going to do another hour and I didn't want him to overdo it. But he's that type of kid, and everybody else in the program sees that. And they know, like, that's the way to get great. So he's an unbelievable kid, and Villanova is the perfect fit, and I'm just excited to watch his growth.
Now, this year you had Nico Galette. He was a senior. He was an incredible player, but he also went through some hardship with losing his mom. Talk a little bit about him.
Yeah. So obviously, we talk about highs and lows in basketball and in life. So we had a really, really good season. And the last time I saw his mother was after we lost in the state final against the sectional final against Wildwood Catholic. And obviously we were down, but I mean, we were 27-2, had a great year. In that game, we actually had probably half the team under the weather. We don't make excuses. It wasn't our day. They played well, but all things considered, we weren't right that game. And we felt really down after that game. And I'll never forget when we walked out of the locker room, obviously the end of the year, so we kind of kept it a little upbeat if we could, but we were sad. We wanted to win everything. But when we walked out, Nico's mother was standing there smiling, ready to hug every single person who walked out of that locker room. And that's the type of person she was. Her smile brightened any room, made anyone feel better. She was an unbelievable mother, and she had an unbelievable son. Nico, I've never been around someone who is more excited for other people's success than Nico Galette. And you see it on game tape. And obviously in quarantine, I've been watching a lot of game tape, and I see it more and more. Even like you're watching all the highlights. When Trey's above the rim dunking, you pause it, you see behind him, Nico is even higher in the air than Trey, excited for Trey. And he's that type of kid. When someone else would make a shot, he's cheering. When a freshman, I mean, I'll never forget, we had a JV tournament during some time we were off, and I showed up a couple minutes into the game, and Nico's in the first seat helping coach. He's coaching the game. And, I mean, unbelievable leader, awesome kid, and he's getting better and better. And I think Sacred Heart got an absolute steal. But he averaged about 15 and 11 for a 27-2 team that was ranked in the top 5 for most of the year in our state. And it was obviously New Jersey's always one of the best states. So special kid, and it's going to be tough to replace Nico.
So let's talk about, some of the other guys on the Rutgers Prep squad.
Sure. So I guess we talked about Trey, we talked about Nico. Noah Harris is a rising senior, 6'1", playmaker, obviously wonderful shooter. Probably one of the best shooters I've been around at any level. If he's open, it's a good shot and it's going in. That's how I feel as a coach. But obviously with the ball in his hands more, he's had to kind of develop that playmaking skill set, which I want all of our guys to be versatile. I want every single one of our guys to be able to get a rebound and push the ball. And obviously a lot of that has fallen on Noah, but Noah's just as good off the ball. So he's a winner. He wants to guard the other team's best player if it happens to be a guard. Obviously, Trey can guard anybody, which makes him versatile and valuable. But between the two of them, they're guarding the two best players on the other team. And as a coach, that makes my job easy.
So last year, you guys went 27-2. Talk about, that season as a whole.
I mean, we knew going into the season that we were going to be good. Before last season, it was the first time we could really play competitive games with our high school team. We went to Philly Live twice. We ended up going 6-0 in both sessions in front of dozens of college coaches, some of the biggest names in the country. And we beat 5 Max Prep's top 100 teams. And I think the 6th team we beat ended up winning a state championship in Florida. So we beat 6 really, really strong teams. So we knew we had something brewing. I didn't know we were 27-2 good because our schedule was pretty intense. But we kind of just had great energy all year. And we talked earlier about coaching philosophy, and we talked about talent and other stuff. The thing we emphasized this year in terms of that other stuff was our energy. And we really, really brought good energy, and it showed in our play. We rode that wave all season long. I mean, the Wildwood Catholic game, for whatever reason, we had no energy. And it ended up doing us in the end. But as a coach, in hindsight, I think that was good for our program. I think had we won that game, or if the circumstances were different, and then the next day is when everything got shut down, all our guys would have been talking, oh, we would have won the TOC, and woe is me because we weren't able to finish. But the fact that we had some closure and it kept our guys hungry, and our guys have been working. They're hungry. They have that sour feeling. And at this age, that's what you want. You don't want to be content. You want to be hungry. You want to be driven. And I think they've been driven. They've been working at home in their driveways, doing whatever they can do, but they're hungry to get back. And we're exactly where we should be as a program.
So this is a question that I love to ask all of my guests. If you could go back to, say, 2000, what year was that when you got the Rutgers job? So yeah,
2007-ish?
Yeah, 2007. What would you tell yourself at that time as you were trying to get into basketball?
I mean, the same thing. I honestly, let's backtrack one more year. So when I left the law firm and I just wanted to get into basketball, I was willing to do anything and everything just to stay afloat and to try to get my foot in the door. The hardest part is getting that foot in the door. So we talked a couple about the camps and the odd jobs at doing Rutgers camps and that sort of thing. I also worked a couple weekends at CSTV. I met some people that still help me to this day. I don't know if Seth Davis, who wrote a couple books, he's like the CBS sports expert, college basketball analyst. I actually did the research for 2 of his books just with a connection from one of my college friends. And even that it kept me in basketball. And it's funny because everything comes full circle. So one of Seth Davis's books, he wrote a book on John Wooden. And obviously he wrote it when John Wooden was still alive. It's since been published. About 10 years later, I want to say, that book showed up on Coach G's desk at LaSalle. And at the time, it's a massive book, and he didn't have time to read it. So as the ops guy, he calls me in the office, and he's like, Bloom, I need you to read this book and tell me if there's anything good in it. Tell me if there's anything important. So I laughed at him, and I said, Coach, done. Like, I don't even need to read it. I did the research for it. So, I mean, all these little jobs and these relationships, it comes full circle because somebody knows somebody, and somebody's willing to help. So what I would do differently, or what I would tell myself, really value the relationships. And don't just shake hands and remember a name for that day, but follow up with that person and check in on them and call that player from 10 years ago. And Coach Dunphy did a wonderful job kind of instilling that in all of us. His big thing when I was at Penn as a manager, introduce yourself to everyone in the room. There's no one more important than someone else, whether it's the janitor, the secretary, or the athletic director, or some famous guest. Everybody's a human being, so treat them with respect, and that's kind of stuck with me. So be nice to everybody and really value those relationships.
Final question. What's next in the future for Matt Bloom and the Rutgers Prep Argonauts?
I mean, obviously, with what's going on in the world, I don't think anyone knows what's next, but our motto is always get better every day. Do whatever you can today, do it, and you'll be better than you were yesterday. So I've challenged our guys to obviously try to be leaders, be smart, make good decisions, but come out of this better than you went into it. And our guys, I mean, you can see it. People, it's high school, so kids are growing. I think the positive side effects, kids are sleeping more, they're eating better. And I mean, some kids, we're fortunate that our kids come from pretty good situations where they're able to kind of take the positives out of this situation. And hopefully they come out stronger and in the best shape of their lives, because I know everyone's itching to get back on the court, but it's the same every year. And the first practice, everyone's always ready to go with full energy. What about that 10th practice? And I think with all of our experiences last year and with that sour taste from that last game, and then with the pandemic and then everything else going on in the world, I just think that our kids see the big picture and they get it and they appreciate things more, and it's going to show in our play. And I'm really excited. Obviously, we have Trey and Noah as two unbelievable seniors. Sebastian Charles is another rising senior. He's the younger brother of Jonah Charles, who's at Penn, and his older brother Carl played at Holy Cross. So he was our sixth man last year, did some really good stuff for us. He's growing. He tells me he's growing every day. So I think he's going to be 6'3", 6'4", and he'll do whatever we ask him to do. He's a phenomenal student athlete. And then a rising junior, Ryan Pettit, June 15th just happened, and college coaches have been calling him off the hook. And if you know anything about Ryan Pettit, he took 56 charges as a sophomore.
Wow.
I posted the video on Instagram, so you should check it out. But he took 35 as a freshman, 56 as a sophomore. And what college coaches are telling me is that, coach, you have a kid who is the best at something in the country. Whether it's 100% true, he's definitely top 5. But whether they're telling me you have someone who's the best, and it's something that's hard to measure. Obviously, we measured it with charges. But when you look at effort and hustle and winning plays, this kid would, no lie, run through the wall. And he gets our team possessions. He makes people better. He gives energy. And when you have guys like Trey and Noah, you need those quote-unquote role players. Obviously, his role is going to expand a little bit, but it's a natural expansion. And he's ready for it. He works. And he's just an unbelievable teammate. And then, like I said, we have a bunch of freshmen who are going to be sophomores. They got their feet wet with playing JV last year and some spot minutes here and there with varsity, but some of them are really going to surprise you, whether it's Cam Paget, whether it's Jordy Atkins, Johnny Century, we had Franklin Jones and James Jackman. It's a strong group that really make each other better, and they're going to make our program better.
Well, Coach, thanks you for coming on and sharing your testimony, and I wish you and the Argonauts nothing but the best moving forward.
No, appreciate you for having me, and I'm happy to talk basketball anytime. So thank you again.
Everybody, this is episode 38. For those of you from Teaneck, those of you from Rutgers Prep, and everywhere else, go support this episode by checking it out on YouTube, Facebook, and IGTV. Now, I know phase 2 is opening up in New York and New Jersey, but everybody stay safe. Do what you please, but also be cautious. All right? If you have to travel cautiously. If you have to walk around, travel cautiously. If you want to go to restaurants, you can do that, but travel cautiously. Be safe, be blessed. Peace.